Hey everybody, I'm here today to talk about chapter 14, family therapy. So just a second, let me share my screen with you. All right, so all of you clinical mental health people will definitely take the family therapy class anyway, so this is just a super brief overview. And those of you on the school counseling track, you likely won't necessarily unless you take it as an elective, but this is an overview of, some family therapy approaches to theories. All right, so family therapy, oh, and it looks like I have my little buddy with me today. This is Paco. He may or may not bother us, I'm not sure, but anyway, so family therapy started in the 1940s by Jay Haley, and it's rooted in Jay Haley and many others, Strikers, Adler, Minichin, a variety of people really contributed to family therapy. It's rooted in a systems approach, which acknowledges the connections between family members and all parts of one system. So the idea being that if one person struggles with an addiction, for instance, it impacts every part of the system. It impacts all the other members of the family. Or if someone struggles with any other mental health concern, or even developmental delays or issues or health problems. So just the idea being that we're just all connected and that the family is in one cohesive system. And so that the positives and the negatives influence the family system and people in the system. This perspective is grounded on the assumptions that a client's problematic behavior may serve a function or purpose for the family. It could be unintentionally maintained by family processes, and it could be a function of the family's inability to operate productively, especially during developmental transitions. So an example of this might be, let's say someone takes on the role of being an overachiever. That might serve the purpose of making the family look functional, or like kind of quelling the fears of the caregivers, for instance, about everything being okay if there's some other dysfunction in the family, like alcoholism or, some other major rift, like a divorce or something like that. So someone might overcompensate to take attention off the problems in the family, and give the family worth. And, another example of this could be that someone is scapegoated. So let's say there is someone who is abusing substances. Let's say a teenager is abusing substances, and they're acting out in reaction to a parental divorce. It might be easier for the parents to really point the finger at the child and say, this is the dysfunction instead of we're the problem here, because the child may be reacting negatively to the parental dysfunction. So this can go, the combinations of these types of things can be endless. I think we all sort of recognize that we're impacted by our families of origin, and we impact our families of origin. That might be the part that we don't seem to understand a lot of times. But, we are all functioning as a part of a system. We impact the system, and we're impacted by the system. Let's see. And it could also be, the issue could be that there are dysfunctional patterns handed down across the generations. So again, substance abuse is a good example of this, but it could be anything from eating, like disordered eating, or patterns of abuse, or even just communication styles and patterns. So for example, if a family is very closed off and people don't share very much, that could be just something that was an intergenerational pattern that was passed down. Family therapy perspectives call for a conceptual shift from evaluating individuals to focusing on system dynamics, or how individuals within a system react to each other. So the history of family therapy started around the late 1920s, early 30s with Alfred Adler and Rudolf Dreikurs. Um, they began doing family therapy in the 20s, focused on family atmosphere and family constellation. They called it open forum family counseling. And then Murray Bowen, around a similar time frame, maybe a little bit later, created multi-generational family therapy and saw the value of identifying patterns in the family that were passed from generation to generation. And so they actually look at those intergenerational patterns and the heritability of certain issues in the family system. Monica McGoldrick and Betty Carter created genograms and did tons of research into intergenerational patterns based on Murray Bowen's model. And this is actually the first time I've seen in a textbook the focus on these women as being such pivotal researchers in the field of family therapy, which is a good sign because it means that our profession is becoming more inclusive and a little bit less sexist. So that's a good thing. Virginia Satir created the conjoint family therapy process, which focuses on communication, building self-esteem, and an experiential approach. Her authenticity encouraged families to be more emotionally real with each other. And if you ever get a chance to see Virginia Satir's videos, she is such a dynamic force. She's super loving and authentic and just charismatic. And so you can really see why and how she had such great success with families, because she really challenged them in experiential ways, but she was extremely available and empathetic, and just, present with the clients that she served. And so her main thing was about building self-esteem and improving communication patterns. Structural family therapy emerged in the 1970s by Salvador Minichin and Jay Haley. The interventions generated in these models became synonymous with a systems approach. They included joining, boundary setting, unbalancing, reframing, ordeals, paradoxical interventions, and enactments, and they focused on hierarchy and connectedness. So kind of the main thing here is they looked at the structure of the family and tried to find where there was a lack of balance. What they started to do at first was they would join with the family, which means, you're making a bond, you're connecting emotionally with them, and you would help reset boundaries, because if the hierarchy is out of balance, then maybe there are some boundaries that are not in place. Maybe one kid runs the show, or parents are putting too much on the kids, or letting them get away with too much. They would kind of look at those imbalances and help with that, and unbalancing. So sometimes they would throw a wrench in the plan and try to do things differently to see how to sort of show how certain patterns were or were not working. Reframing, that's a technique of looking at negative patterns but sort of reframing them as strengths. Paradoxical interventions and ordeals were when they would give the family some counterintuitive things to do. One I'm thinking of in particular is like spitting in the client's soup. So, or doing something totally unexpected just to cause kind of a rift, but it's therapeutically intentional. So they might give a homework assignment for the parents to fight for 30 minutes a day or something, and enactment, so role playing. They focused on hierarchy and connectedness and redrawing those lines. And then we have feminist, multicultural, and postmodern and social constructionist approaches. And they take a more multicultural, pluralistic approach to family therapy, and they're very aware of the power dynamics in the counseling relationship and seek to create egalitarianism in the counseling relationship. And they acknowledge systems outside of the family as being impactful. So here, they're going to look a lot more at maybe the family's place in society, maybe societal oppression, socioeconomic status, issues that are happening on like maybe a community-wide level or even a national political level. And so we're looking at kind of all of the things that happen in society that impacts the family and the individual. So keeping all of that in mind. A multi-layered approach to family therapy is best supported by a collaborative therapist-client relationship in which mutual respect, caring, empathy, and a genuine interest in others is primary. In addition, we believe directed actions and enactments are most useful when they're a joint venture of the therapist and the family. So sometimes you need the energy and the creativity of the therapist to kind of jumpstart this, but without the buy-in from the family, it's not going to really be effective. And therapists build a relationship with the family through joining, engagement, or simple care and concern. So those skills that you use in individual therapy are going to be very similar with family therapy. You're just working with more people in the room, which can be challenging in and of itself. The structure of therapy is focused on assessing family processes and content. So while listening to content, the therapist is digging deeper into process knowledge and looking for patterns of communication and behavior. And understanding family process is almost always facilitated by how questions. So questions that begin with what, where, and why tend to overemphasize content, but questions that begin with how really give some insight on the actual processes and the daily lives of the people in front of you. So obviously, if you're asking a family, how do you structure a morning routine? That's going to give you a lot of information about process as opposed to content. Like, what do you do in the morning when you wake up? Okay. So, or what is it that you came here for? Or what's your main concern? So you'll get a lot of information, but you want to try to get information about the processes of which the family are a part. So in assessment, some of the biggest tool that kind of came out of the family therapy movement is the Genogram. And this is really helpful for the therapist to figure out who's a part of the family, who's related to whom. If you're doing, intergenerational family therapy, you're going to look multiple generations in the past, well, usually about 3 generations. But it also tells you about marriage status, death, disease, broken relationships. So the deceased has the X, and there's usually a hash mark for like maybe a broken relationship. This one's a very basic example, but there's keys out there with lots of information on how to create a genogram. So if you take the family therapy class, you'll get some more information about that. Multicultural family counseling, always a big focus for us, of course. We have to, and so as family therapists, it's important to recognize strengths in multicultural families, and therapists involve extended family and relevant family members. So that can be like grandmothers, aunts, uncles, cousins, even, unmarried partners. Whoever is considered a part of their chosen family is who you want to include. So Monica McGoldrick has been the most influential leader in the development of both gender and cultural perspectives and frameworks in family practice. And in many ways, McGoldrick and her colleagues approach families like systems anthropologists. They see each family as a unique culture whose characteristics must be understood. So I think that's what's important is, really allowing the family to unfold in front of you without having a lot of preconceptions about nuclear families and blended families and who should be a part of a family or who's not part of a family. We also want to be mindful of gender issues. And McGoldrick says that, an awareness of those gender issues is an essential framework for family therapy. So what are the gender roles? Who's doing what work? And is it working for the family? What are their values in relation to those gender roles? Are they enjoying the gender roles or is it not working? Those are things you want to ask yourself without using your own lens through which to view families in the world. And then the question remains, how do we blend feminism into family therapy while still respecting the culture of the family? So you're not going to push an egalitarian structure if it doesn't work culturally for that family or those people. You want to work within their framework and try to help encourage positivity within that system. All right. And it's important to remember that there are feminist voices in every culture throughout the world. So, excuse me. While there can be some issues with marginalization of women in almost every single culture, there are feminist voices and heroes in every culture throughout the world. So maybe we can highlight some of those feminine strengths that are present within their culture. And shortcomings of family therapy that can occur. So the process of differentiation occurs in most cultures, but it takes on a different shape due to cultural norms. Some practitioners may erroneously assume Western models of family are universal. So again, looking through your worldview, your lens, when, families over in East Asia are structured extremely differently from families here. Families here are a lot more individualistic. There's the idea that like the children grow up and then they move out and then they come hang out on holidays. Whereas in the Eastern world, the families often live together, for most or all of their lives. It's just a very different structure. So we really need to make sure that we are operating from the lens of the family. And then some family therapists focus primarily on the nuclear family, which is based on Western notions. And we know as families evolve and change, it's becoming structurally very different. It can be, nuclear families with same-sex couples. It could be chosen families as opposed to marriage or, cleaving to your family of origin if there was abuse or other situations. So, a family is really a group of people who define themselves as family. And so we need to be, curious about how the family defines themselves when they come into our office. Let's see. Yeah. And some basic assumptions. So this is our summary of family therapy, which includes the basic assumption that the family is a system, and therefore behaviors and symptoms occur within the system are connected. So you have to treat the entire family to address the symptoms and vice versa. It's brief. So family therapy is brief, present focused, and dynamic. Changing the system generates change quickly. And the role and goals and values. So specific goals are determined by the practitioner's orientation and by a collaborative process between the family and therapist. So we're always going to work with what they're wanting to change, of course. We can consistently monitor therapist values to avoid imparting values onto families and change. So various theories promote change in different ways. So again, if you take the marriage and family therapy class, we'll have an entire class just like this. This is on various theories in family therapy. So there are as many theories, about as many as there are in here, covered in that class. So just know that this was very much the tip of the iceberg in terms of what I presented just now. So personal characteristics can really be even more important than the theory you choose when working with families. So we want to be compassionate, empathetic, sensitive. We also want to have a rationale for the techniques that we use and some sense of the expected outcomes. Faced with meeting the demands of clinical practice, practitioners will need to be flexible in selecting intervention strategies. The central consideration of what is in the best interest of the family. Some of the benefits of family therapy include rapid change. So not one individual is to blame, nor is the entire family stigmatized. Because when you change, it's amazing. If you start doing family therapy, what you'll see is it's amazing. Once you start to change one aspect of the family system, it can really impact the whole. So I saw this a whole lot in drug rehabilitation. Because once that person got sober and they started to set healthy boundaries and take care of themselves and do the things that maybe they weren't taught in their family of origin, they started having more positive shifts on the people in that family of origin. They started, either teaching them or setting boundaries, which then, gave some pushback to the person and really like encouraged more positive behavior. So it can be really impactful. So let's see. Some of the drawbacks include it can be really easy to stigmatize the family with labels such as enmeshed, dysfunctional, disengaged, etc., focusing on an overly Western model of the ideal family or ignoring individual needs. So we have to be aware of all of these things. We also need to be aware of the ever-evolving gender roles and family constructions to best help families. So that is all I have for you today. That is just an overview of family therapy. And again, you're going to get a lot more information when you take the marriage and couples family therapy class. So stay tuned. Thank you so much and have a great day.